I am getting ready to transplant quite a few of my spring crops this morning. So I thought I would give you all a quick look at how I prep my beds for spring planting. Now I do have a little bit of a cheat built in. I do some of the prep work the fall before planting. And this is really the key because it allows me to get in and plant even earlier in the spring. And be sure to subscribe if you're curious about that process because I will be showing that in a subsequent video. But today we're going to focus on spring bed prep. So the very first thing I want to mention for prepping garden beds is that you may want to consider having a soil test done. So I had one done 2 falls ago, and I like to do them every 2 to 3 years if possible. And this is especially important if I'm starting out in a completely new area. So if you are gardening in a new spot, I highly suggest getting a soil lab test done. I like to use Kinsey Agricultural Services because they give a lot of recommendations about application rates and what you should add to your soil, and I found that very helpful. Now, for example, when I did my soil test 2 years ago, it came back that I was very low in nitrogen. So based on that information, in the spring, I did a top dress with an all natural, it was actually a lawn fertilizer, it was like an 800 high nitrogen formula, and applied that to all of my beds. It was about a month before I planted anything. And then I've also been focusing on adding natural high nitrogen, so like pelletized chicken manure and other good organic sources of nitrogen. So this year, I won't be adding any specific amendments, but I am adding compost, which I like to do every year. So let's take a look at these beds. So what you may notice here is I've got everything in a row format. And this is simply a personal preference. It makes it easier for me to plant back here, so this is what I've gone with. But I do the same process with my small beds up here as well. And a big part of the prep in the fall is getting these raised planting rows formed. I then try to always get them planted with cover crop, or at the very least mulched heavily with something like grass clippings or leaf mulch. So in the spring, what I end up doing is either just brushing away the residue from the cover crop, things like daikon radish, the leaves die off and I can just kind of brush them out of the way. If there's mulch in the way, I just kind of pull it off to the sides of the beds. And if it's an overwintered cover crop, I will terminate it and allow the residue to remain as mulch. So after I have the mulch pushed out of the way a bit, and if you had a smaller amount than this, you could certainly just leave it in place and work it into the soil. I mulch pretty heavily, so I like to just push it out of the way. After I'm done with that step, I will add a couple of inches thick layer of compost. Now I use mushroom compost because that's what I have available, but whatever you have, if it's your homemade compost, if it's good composted manure, just anything to add some nutrition and organic matter to that soil. So I'm going to add that compost to the top. And the next step is to use a garden fork to both incorporate the compost a little into the soil and open up my soil. So if you had really nice, loose, loamy soil to begin with, you could probably skip this step entirely. But because I am dealing with heavy, dense clay, I like to get in there and aerate the soil a little each spring. And this does open up and aerate the soil with minimal disruption to the microbes and the earthworms and the other things that are living in the soil. So this is as easy as driving that fork in, giving it a couple little wiggles, and that's it. Then I just smooth the planting surface out a tad, and I'm ready to plant. Now, as I mentioned, some of the prep work is being done beforehand. So ideally, the fall before I want to plant an area, I will come in and create raised rows or planting beds. I create a devoted walkway where I lay down cardboard, and this is agricultural hay mulch. And then As long as I have time, I will plant that bed in cover crop. If I run out of time, I will just do a very heavy mulch with an organic material like grass clippings or leaf mulch or something of the like. So you can see here, these are 2 new planting rows that I formed last fall. Cardboard down, I still haven't gotten the hay on top, but these were both planted in daikon radish last fall. I'm planting the one behind me up this spring. This one's going to be held for my warm season crops. So in the meantime, I've got a spring cover crop blend on this bed. And this has oats and winter peas and something else that I can't remember. But I just sowed this a couple weeks ago. Now this process has worked really well, in particular when dealing with my clay soil. So as you may know, clay tends to hold a lot of water, and we get quite a bit of rain in the spring. So there are many years where it's the end of May, even the beginning of June, before this soil is dried out enough to be able to work. So this became a necessity for me to be able to plant my early spring crops. Now by raising these rows up, it allows for quicker drainage. And the fact that I don't have to get in there until every single spring is not only awesomely beneficial for the soil, but also allows me to get in and plant earlier. But I've got a lot of planting to do, so I'm gonna get to it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.